Welcome, everyone. This is a DigitalOcean tech talk called Supercharging How to Build Your Apps with Little to No Code. We're excited to have you here. And we are really thrilled to announce that we now have an integration between Glitch and DigitalOcean. And to celebrate that integration launching, we have the CEO of Glitch, Anil Dash, and the Chief Product Officer of DigitalOcean, Gabe Monroy. So my name is Kim Schlesinger. I'm a developer advocate at DigitalOcean, and I'm going to introduce these two guests. So first, we have Anil Dash. He is the CEO of Glitch, which is a friendly developer community where coders have collaborated to create and share millions of web apps. Anil is recognized as a leading advocate for a more humane, inclusive, and ethical tech industry through his work as an entrepreneur, activist, and writer. Go ahead and say hey, Anil.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. And then the other guest we have today is Gabe Monroy, who is currently the Chief Product Officer at DigitalOcean, where he oversees the product management organization and owns the company's product vision. Previous to DigitalOcean, Gabe was Vice President of the Azure Developer Experience Group at Microsoft and founder and Chief Technology Officer of Deis, which was acquired by Microsoft in 2017. After joining Microsoft, Gabe started the Azure Kubernetes service, the fastest growing compute service in Azure's history. Gabe was an early contributor to Docker and Kubernetes and a founding member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the CNCF. Gabe has a lot of experience in open source software and cloud native technology. So say hey, Gabe.
Hey, Kim, thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. Well, if you are watching live, we'd love for you to say hello. Tell us where you're watching from and maybe why you dropped by and you wanted to see this particular tech talk. So, like I mentioned at the top, we have a new integration where you can create or remix an app on Glitch and then quickly deploy it to DigitalOcean. And you get a lot of power by deploying it to DigitalOcean where you can scale the application and really do some powerful things. So I think the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you a demo of how to use Glitch and DigitalOcean together. So let me share my screen. Beautiful. And this is a pre-recorded video, but here we go. So we've started here. We're at Glitch's page for their playlist, and we have a playlist called Deploy to DigitalOcean. There are 4 apps here that you can experiment with and remix. And for this demo, we're going to remix the Hello DigitalOcean Node app. So this is a Node.js app. This is what the application does. You can tell the application what your favorite color is, and there's a little database. And if the color is found, it will change the color on the hello do text, as well as give you the hex value for that particular color. If you don't know which color you want to search for, you can click the use a random color button. So I'm going to remix this app, and I already did all the work of remixing the app. So I want to show you in the Glitch development environment what I did. So I took that app and I changed it to the best tech mascot app. So we've got Sammy the shark, which is DigitalOcean's mascot. We've got the Glitch fish, which is a mascot we love. And then there's some other mascots that I'm particularly fond of, Octocat from GitHub. Then you can click the choose a random mascot button and it'll go through randomly selecting those different mascots. So this is on the Glitch platform. It's been deployed, but I want to add this to DigitalOcean. So I go to my DigitalOcean account. I need to create an API token. I'm calling this one Glitch, and I'm selecting an expiration date. I'm going to grab the token and put it on my clipboard, and then go back to the Glitch text editor. I go to the .env file, and I'm going to add an environment variable. I'm going to paste the value in. And then in order to connect Glitch with my DigitalOcean account, I have to have this environment variable named DigitalOcean Access Token. So you see when I put that in, up in the top left corner, there's a button that says Add to App Platform. So I'm setting up the integration between Glitch and the DigitalOcean app platform. And then I go back to my DigitalOcean account. I go to the app platform view, and you can see that famous familiar clock. That was the name that Glitch gave my remixed application. It's now on DigitalOcean. I've deployed it with app platform. And in this new tab, I've got my best tech mascot application live and running on the internet through DigitalOcean. So just so you can see it, we've got Beastie, the BSD mascot, got Sammy again, and then I can click that random button. We've got Tux, the Linux penguin. So now I want to show you how to scale this application. You go to the settings tab and you find the node component. And what I'm going to do is I want to increase the number of containers that are running. So if I get a lot of traffic on this application, I can handle that. So I need to pick the size of the containers that I'm going to use. And it tells us how many dollars per month that's going to be. So I'm grabbing this pro size, and then I'm scaling up the number of containers to 5. I get a view that asks, is this what you want to do? I click update the plan. And so those containers are scaling up, and I go back to my app. The URL remains the same. And now I have like this really robust application that can accept a lot of user traffic. And so that is the very fast way to use Glitch and DigitalOcean to remix an app, to deploy it, and then scale it up. So let me stop sharing my screen. I want to say hey to some folks in the audience. Thanks for saying hi. We've got Harold from Italy. We've got Mikhail from Turkey, Sanjeev from London, Miles from Austin, Texas, Mark Vincent from the Philippines, Mr. Tubber 44, great to have you. Samuel, got Daniel from Los Angeles, and they say, big fan of Glitch, always been curious about DigitalOcean, and the DO blog has been an invaluable resource. Got Rohit saying, I think DigitalOcean is the best for WordPress hosting. Thank you, Rohit. And then Michael from Denmark. Great. All right, so let's start with the questions for Anil and Gabe. So the first question is, there are so many people who are new to the tech industry. I think 40 million people is the estimate, and they are currently learning how to build and deploy applications. How does something like the Glitch and DigitalOcean integration support these kind of technologists? And what does the future of application development look like?
Yeah, Neil, please start on that. I think, Glitch is doing a lot in this area. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks so much. It's a big question. I think first I want to sort of just say it's really exciting to see all this come together. Kim, thanks for walking everybody through it. I think it is just incredible what both teams have done collaborating together. And there's this, I think it's no coincidence we got a whale and some fish logos together, right? Everybody's in this big sea together. And, I think it actually speaks to the ethos about all these new people that are going to come into tech, and they're going to be coding and they're going to be creating, which is that one, there is room for everybody. There definitely is sort of space, and it is going to take everybody working together to do it. I mean, I think it is seen maybe somewhat as an old-fashioned idea that all the companies that care about developers and that build platforms developers will use should work together. And I think that's one of those things that's essential to bringing in everybody. But then there's some fundamentals, right? Which is that, first of all, can we make the tools accessible? Can they be as easy as, something that you can walk through in 2 or 3 minutes and say, now you have something live on the internet? I think nothing really substitutes for that immediacy of interaction, of I have an idea and maybe I can make something. I think that ability to have trial and error and break stuff a little bit and then fix it, I think is really powerful. And at the same time, that principle of, and the sky's the limit. If you make something and it takes off, you don't have to be the world's expert. You don't have to be the person that's inventing, every part of the infrastructure in the stack. You can just have a good idea, and there is still an internet that can take off in that way. So I think those are really fundamental. And then the last piece that is really key is being part of a community. I mean, I think you have to have peers. I think one of the things that, I've been coding a long time, I wish I'd known at the beginning of coding is, we're all learning all the time. We are all beginners in some part of this. Guarantee you, if you're building anything more than Hello World, you're going to be wondering, man, there's something I got to look up. There's something I have to, I have to go search for. And and that sense that you're not alone, and that the platforms will support you, but also the people around you are going through that same path of learning. I think the more we can do to remind everybody that we're all at the beginning of some part of our coding journey, we're all at the beginning of making stuff. We all have ideas that are worth putting out in the world. I think that's all. The underlying principles and everything we can do to bolster that is the next step. So Gabe, you probably have a deeper framing of that.
Yeah, no, and I agree with everything that you said. And again, it's 40 million new developers estimated to enter the market by the year 2030. I mean, just like grapple with that number. That's a lot of people, right? And those people, I'd argue, aren't very well served by some of the tools and things that they're asked to learn today. And so we as an industry really need to up level the simplicity game and just make sure that we're creating stuff that's approachable, where we have the community dynamic, that you're referencing, Anil, where we can make people feel welcome, make people feel supported on their learning journey, and ultimately allow them to unleash their ideas and innovations to the world. Because, look, I'm not going to be, you and me, Anil, we've, we're a little bit further along in our career, right?
Yeah.
We still have some stuff to contribute, but I'm really looking forward to the ideas and the innovation that the next generation has and wants to share with the world. And I think we owe it to that group to make it easier than it has been before, democratize the technology, if you want to call it that, and make it simpler. But I say this, being a huge Glitch fan, I have to say, just from the minute I saw Glitch, I really think the metaphor of remixing and kind of like the music, element, where I think you had a lot of that creative energy through that industry, remixing playlists. And it's funny, I think you and I, Anil, talked about how people initially were like, oh, I don't really understand how those things connect. But as you start to wade in deeper, it is actually a really natural metaphor. And I think a lot of the success I've seen in terms of the Glitch community, I can personally tie back my experience there to how easy and seamless that process has been. But I think one of the challenges with any new, novel developer experience is you can focus on making it really easy to get started and to learn. But when you actually hit, real production needs and real scale, does that experience that, had all the bells and whistles and was super seamless to get started with, can that actually take you to the next level? Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I look at this partnership as, like, by gluing together what Glitch is doing kind of on the front end of the experience with the back end of that platform and the ability to scale this, to meet the needs of real large scale production applications, data services, everything that you might require to kind of back that application. It's really combining the best of both worlds, where you've got the great developer experience, you've got the ability to scale this in a sort of production grade way. And it's a great example to me of, two companies, same team, right? Yeah. Like we're all focused on, trying to do the best we can for this 40 million new developers entering the market, and super proud of what the team's delivered here, and really happy to showcase that.
Yeah, I would say, first I would emphasize, this is just the beginning. I think we have so many more things to, like any developer, right? You see, they're like, oh, you know what else I want to do? And I have these other ideas, and, all things I want to ship. But I think the teams have done an incredible job of a great starting point. I think something really, really, really impressive. And yeah, I think you highlight that point of there being that robustness, to the DigitalOcean platform that is, unparalleled. And it was one of the key innovations right from the start that I think people have relied on, and it's powerful. I think that idea of, like I said, you don't have to learn how to make all of that happen yourself. You can rely on these platforms that'll sort of deliver it. But I think there's also part two that is not as obvious if you are newer to the industry, which is the idea that these pieces should work together. It should be possible to move your code around, to move your apps around, to connect things together, to get the capabilities you want, to not be locked in, to not be sort of tied into one platform. I think, ease of use is really great. And at the same time, being honest, I've seen platforms where they are super easy to get something built, and you can't edit the code, or you can't take it with you, or you can't, export it to GitHub, or you can't, whatever it is you want to do with it, is a little bit tied down. And that, it seems, I don't know, like I said, maybe old-fashioned or maybe a little bit idealistic, but it's really important. And I think it's not as obvious when you're starting out. You sort of say, oh, well, let me take the convenience, let me take the shortcut. And we have to make sure that the thing that makes it easy is not the thing that ties your hands down the road and makes you feel like you're stuck or cuts you off from the rest of the ecosystem or the millions of other developers that have made cool stuff. Even just being able to reuse their code, I think is something really powerful. So, yeah, I think there is there's a little bit of a opinionated point of view underlying how both companies have done this together, which is that you should be part of a larger ecosystem. You should be connected to that world. And I remember from the earliest days that I was lucky to get to be a fan of, DigitalOcean right from the start. And the first demos I saw was people writing tutorials and, I live in New York City, people hosting meetups and saying like, do you just want to learn how to use this tech or learn this new framework or language? And it was not just about, hey, use our product right now, right? It was about, there's something bigger about the way that we learn, the way we create, the way we code, the way we connect, and the way that you have control over what you make. That's kind of always been true. And I think that's been worth fighting for. So that's as exciting to me as all the other parts of this.
Yeah, Anil, I totally agree. And I think there's the difference between kind of bounded product experiences where it's like, look, this is the product, this is how we intend you to use it. And, these are the guardrails and we'll make you successful in these guardrails versus a platform that takes a courageous stance on we're not going to bound your experience because frankly, we don't know what you're going to want to do with this. We don't know where the innovation drive is going to take you next, and creating the flexibility of allowing you to move code to different platforms, not be locked in, really have to earn the right, on a given hosting provider to, earn those workloads. That kind of thing, developers and builders, they understand when they're being kind of herded down a particular product experience versus when they're being given sort of this creative free space to roam. And I really think that, Glitch, and I'd argue the DigitalOcean partnership has really set that, struck that balance of, finding a really novel, unique, interesting user experience, but also isn't constrained so much that like you can't kind of take it the direction that you need to, because the last thing developers want is to be told what they can and can't do. So I'm quite happy with how that's turned out.
Yeah, I think about it a lot of the easier tools, talk about being no code, and which is great. I mean, I love those tools. I use them. But a lot of times what we talk about inside Glitch is being yes code, which is that there's a joy in writing code and seeing it work. And when that moment you get something that just, the page lights up or the change shows up on your, your app or whatever it is, I think, I never tire of that. I've been making websites for as long as there's been a web, and I really still get excited when you refresh your page in the browser or don't even have to, and it's updated. I think that's just such an exciting feeling. And so I think there's there's nothing like getting your code working or making that change and having it land. And I think that the hard part of coding is not the code, it's almost everything around it. It's if the configuration is too hard, if the setup is too hard, if you have to, if step zero is like learn all of DevOps before you can try out this new framework, like that's hard, right? And I get intimidated by that still, and so I just love that, and I love sharing that joy of it, and I think also letting people know, you don't have to be intimidated, and that we are all going to find a part that we don't know yet, and if you can connect into these experiences, you can also find those other people that are going to say, hey, I figured that out. I know what that answer is. I made something cool. Maybe that'll inspire you to make that cool thing in your mind too.
I'm going to hop in here and say welcome. If you're just joining us, we've got Anil Dash from Glitch and Gabe Monroy from DigitalOcean, and we're talking about our new Glitch and DigitalOcean integration, which we're really excited about. And so Anil and Gabe have been talking. If you have questions for either of these two folks, please ask in the chat. I can interrupt and ask them. But I have a question for both of you. So Anil, you alluded to both DigitalOcean and Glitch having like very opinionated ideas about either code or deployments. Can you tell us about why Glitch was designed as it is? Why can you see all the code and remix it so easily?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is actually experience. So we share co-founders with Stack Overflow and Trello. A lot of the original team was sort of born out of that same ethos. I assume everybody's pretty familiar with Stack Overflow. And one of the lessons, having gotten the chance to work with that team right from the beginning and see that community thrive, was there is a generosity of spirit amongst coders. There is a real sincere and earnest desire to share knowledge and to sort of share answers. And also, everybody relies on that. There is nobody working alone. There is nobody who's got it all memorized. There's nobody who never has to Google, exactly what syntax they were supposed to use or whatever it is, right? And so I think that sense of there being something powerful that we can do together was really key. At the same time, I'd also been one of those people that sort of felt like Stack Overflow was a little intimidating. I was like, I don't know that answer, and I'm afraid that if I ask this question, I'm going to look a little, maybe silly or vulnerable. That's a risky feeling sometimes. And so I think we wanted to balance that with like, how do you create a feeling where everybody is, like I said, kind of a beginner, or at least a beginner's mindset. And even the people who have the experience are not being distracted by the part that doesn't have to do with what they're making. So those were sort of the North Stars. I think one of the ways I think about expressing that is your bug is your bug. If you start from something that works by remixing an app that already runs, and then all of a sudden it stops running, it's because of something you did. It wasn't like I accidentally broke my dev environment, or some dependency updated in the background and I didn't know it, and now I'm tearing my hair out. And I think that was a real sort of the mindset of creating it. The other part was, honestly, so much of the coding world was these like boring green text on a black screen. Like it was just like kind of preaching to the choir. Like everybody who was already in the club could be in and nobody else was welcome. It really felt like the door was closed. And I was like, there are always going to be plenty of tools. There are trillion-dollar companies making tools that are going to be like, this is for all the people who are already coders and experts and whatever. And that's fine. It's great. I use all that stuff. It's wonderful in the ecosystem. But what about something that's got a little bit of heart, a little bit of soul, a little bit of energy to it that feels, frankly, more like the creative environments we're in? When you're in, you see a really funny TikTok creator, or you see somebody that's like killing it on YouTube or Instagram, or even like, a really nice subreddit where people are being positive and helping each other and being wholesome, or, great Discord. I think all those communities have creators that are really regularly inspiring other people. Like you see people, in the comments of a YouTube video about a cooking video, they'd be like, I made it too. And I was, it wasn't perfect the first try, but I made something. I think we wanted to go for that feel. And that was a lot of the sort of inspiration. And the way you do that, just like sharing your recipe when you're cooking, is you share your code when you're coding, and normalizing that. And not, obviously GitHub is great for that, or all the other tools that are in that space are great for that. But also a running app as a starting point, not just the code. So it's almost like getting to taste the food, not just see a recipe. And that sort of changes how you think about, oh, this is what I would make. This is what I would cook, right? And so I think that's just a really, really important thing. And then the last part of it that kind of inspired this approach was, and I saw folks talking in the comments about Wordle, which I am a huge fan of, and I love seeing it take off for a lot of reasons. And I think we can go in a whole digression there. But one of the things to say is, like, how many of the apps that you use in a day, how many of the websites you use in a day were made by somebody a coworker or somebody in your community, one of your neighbors? How many of those things were made out of like excitement or love or passion for something? Like Wordle was made for somebody that wanted to make their partner happy. And that's an old-fashioned way of making the web again, but that is something that is as current and as big a phenomenon as we've seen in tech this year. Again, trillion-dollar companies are not having as much love, as one person making one website using completely standard web technologies that you can view source on and learn from and cheat on finding the words for the solution from. Like I think that's all pretty profound. So that's I think that underpinning is that there is still a web like that to be created, and that much creative energy, and all we have to do is make it visible to people, and they will take off running with it.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. So I feel like it's actually pretty radical that the belief at Glitch is that developers are friendly and collaborative and want to work with one another and empower one another. And like that shows through all of the decisions that you all make at Glitch. So that's outstanding. Yeah, like the community comes through the product, which is really interesting. So Gabe, similarly, DigitalOcean has a very opinionated view on servers and deployments, and one of our core values is simplicity in all that we do. So can you talk about like that decision as a company and how that's playing out right now?
Yeah, look, I think it starts from this concept that, there's a lot of folks that are entering the market that need to be empowered. And, look, there's a lot of folks in the cloud space that are really focused on, proprietary novel innovation, right? Like building the next cool serverless thing or building the next cool, and we do that for sure. But what's more impactful to me is taking stuff that's already popular, where there's already sort of a critical mass, and making it super easy so that we can go reach a broader audience with it, get their ideas into the mix, right? And so a lot of our calories that we put towards innovation are actually in focus. They're focused on how, like, what are the things that are resonating with the developer community? How can we actually take that and make the experiences better? And you can see that in some of what we're doing in terms of the learning modules that we put out, and just sort of teaching people about technology. It's not DigitalOcean specific. It's just like we're here to educate and provide value to the broader developer community on that front. And yeah, we would love for you to try that and build a business ultimately on that with DigitalOcean. But we have to earn the right to do that. And the way we do that is by making the stuff super simple. It has to be simpler than any other platform. And so, one of the ways this also plays out is, rather than just kind of releasing lots and lots of different products that kind of do slightly the same thing. I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Corey Quinn, hilarious guy, but he put out a blog post on his last week in AWS called 17 Ways to Run a Container on AWS. And no knock to AWS. And if you talk, I know I've got a lot of friends there, and they got reasons for why they built 17 different pivots on how to run a container. But like, I would argue that for those 40 million developers, they're not looking to wade through the 17 ways. They've got a job to be done. That's like, I've got this Node app that I need to distribute across the world and back with, some basic data store. Like, can you just tell me how it works, right? And so there's a lot of effort going on in terms of identifying what are those jobs to be done that the developer community has. How can we take popular technologies and make them as simple as possible for folks to integrate on the platform, provide that scale, provide that production grade day 2 and day N experience. And I think that's really, really important. And it really focuses us on what we term internally DO simple, right? So everything we do, we have to run through this lens of, is it DO simple? Is it meeting the bar? And there's lots of stuff that we cut off. We're like, no, this is not hitting that bar. Back to the drawing board on it. And so I think what you can expect to see from us over the past and as well as going forward is more focus on how can we take stuff that's popular, make it super, super seamless, connect that to the broader developer community, and really empower those 40 million folks that we've been talking about.
I love that approach so much because it also, I think there's sort of a myth that you can either be proprietary and easy or open and difficult. I mean, I think that's sort of like the way things are drawn up, and it's not true. It's not true. I think what you all have done, what we aspire to do, and obviously we're small, so we're still getting started out. But I think, there's something about that there are popular technologies, and as I said, the code's not the hard part of them. It's everything around it. It's the complexity. It is learning, 57 different kinds of like container deployment for one platform, and you're like, I don't know all of some giant company's internal jargon. I don't know, I squint and all their sort of like there's dozens of offerings all look kind of the same. And I'm like, I don't know which one to pick. Like, I'm sure if that were my entire job to know that, maybe I would be able to discern. Corey's great. I was on Corey's podcast, I guess a couple months ago now, about 2 months ago. And, and he did sort of frame that up, is that there is this, there's almost this sense that rather than putting the developers first or what users need first and creators need first, it's like kind of putting their org chart first or what, what their organizations do. And I get that. Like, again, I have, nothing but respect for what all the various platforms have done, but I love what, I think DO has been able to keep that North Star over the years of, maybe call it, DigitalOcean simple, but I think that sense of like, what does a developer want? And the thing I want, my example is like, I'm using Node these days. I just want to run a Node app. I don't want to I don't want to learn some proprietary thing, but also that's not the part where I'm doing the innovation. I'm not trying to find what is some new thing I've never discovered before. Like I just want to use the tools I have. The idea is what's new, not that I have to reinvent my entire stack every time.
Yeah, and Anil, to go back to your point about, because I think the TikTok creator example is a really great one, right? Like on TikTok, you got this sharing of ideas, novel, things that folks are doing, and the time for someone to sort of reproduce that or to kind of do their own pivot on that is really small and really compressed. And if you look today in the software development space, it's like, all right, someone built an app, that's pretty cool. Now let me go set up my IDE. Let me go download all these packages. What's the stack we're using? Oh wait, I don't know Postgres. I'm gonna have to swap this with MySQL. It's just like before you get to the value creation part, you've wasted 2 weeks, right?
And it crushes your soul too, right? Like as soon as you run into that, like my dependency's not working, and all I wanted to do was get to cloning something that already exists. I think it's so frustrating. I go back to the Wordle example. We've had this explosion of remixes of Wordle on Glitch, and it is, to do the first version of it, we have a great developer in our community who actually used to be on our team at Glitch, Potch, and he made this, sort of clone of Wordle. And then people took it and remixed it and made, here's one in French, and here's one in Spanish. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then people said, well, here's one that's all 4-letter words and curse words. And I was like, of course, inevitable. It's the internet. It's funny. It's entertaining. And then there was all these other things, there are all the sort of variations. And what people consistently said was, wow, I didn't have to get the basics done. I didn't have to build the core mechanics of it. I could just do the part that was unique to me. I wanted to change the design or change the vocabulary or build in a different kind of visualization and all these other things. And you see people riffing on each other's work. They said, well, that was cool. Let me do one. And now, we've got people doing really esoteric things like, oh, thank you, this is great, that are like, what are the symbols for different birds, and what are the phonemes that people use to phonetically spell things out instead of letters, and just stuff that I had not even conceived of. And then cultural connections. So they're saying, I'm a bird watcher, or I want to celebrate queer culture, or whatever it is. They're all sort of emphasized there. And I think that was that sense of, I think it is exactly like TikTok. Like you make one sound and it catches on, and that's cool. But everybody's sort of remixing that and saying, let me riff on this me and let me respond to it. And I love bringing that energy to coding culture. And then, tellingly, some of these, like the one that's about the I think it's called Sweardle, the sort of curse words one, is getting some scale and is getting a pretty regular audience. And that's where I think, how do you make it almost push button easy for them to be able to scale, or if they want to add more database-based features, that's exactly what, teaming up with DigitalOcean's about for us, is that somebody like that doesn't have to be afraid about, what's the next step if they happen to go global. I mean, I think of last year when that tanker ship was stuck in the Suez Canal. We had a Glitch app that let you place sort of an image of that tanker app anywhere on the map of the world, on the globe, and people were trying out for themselves. It got millions and millions of visitors, and I know, the person that made it was feeling a little bit under the gun. Like, oh wow, this is way bigger than I expected, for considering I made this app in an hour. And I love the idea of people not feeling constrained and not feeling pressure about success. Like when your app goes viral and becomes popular, it should be a thing to celebrate and to feel excited about, not a thing to feel nervous about. And so I think that's something that I love collaborating together. And also I hope people can sort of see that this is what coding can be like. It can be something where there's a playlist of cool apps for you to take inspiration from. And that's the thing that I felt was missing when I was learning to build with a lot of this tech. I couldn't go and look at, maybe I could sort of find something. Once GitHub came along, I could sort of find something, but it's different from seeing it and seeing it running and with one click remix.
Yeah, and I think that point on seeing it running is really critical, because in the olden days, right, you talk about the green screen and kind of the legacy programmers of the past generation. I think there was a lot of interest in sharing at the library level. So there's a lot of, code packages on GitHub where it's like, here's a library. I'm going to import this library. I'm going to use some functions in my app, right? From that library. Maybe I'll swap it for a different library. But there wasn't this concept of sharing a working application that came working out of the box, where the time to value was 30 seconds, a minute, before you actually saw a thing working, you could start hacking and iterating on that thing. And I think that to me is one of the real key innovations of this is you're not just like collaborating on a piece part, you're collaborating on something that kind of works end to end. And that allows you the speed of innovation. I mean, you can start, making it your own at a pace that you couldn't otherwise. And I'm just really excited to see that kind of thing taking off, because I think that kind of step function improvement in terms of how fast you can get moving is going to be key to unlocking the next wave of innovation for
That's really it. You're hired. You told the story better than I can. That's great. But I mean, that's it. And I think that energy is exciting. And I think the sense that also there's no limits to how big you can go with that app. Like that, just because it was easy to build and inspired by somebody else, it doesn't mean that you're also stuck in this little box of, not being able to scale or build something really robust. I think that's the last piece to a really great experience where first you don't have to worry about creating, and then you don't have to worry about scaling. I mean, I think that's such a liberation for people that have a cool idea that they just want to get out in the world.
Yeah, that's such a good observation, Gabe, that on GitHub you can see the code, you can, clone it on your machine, but the skill set you have to like actually get the app up and running on your machine it's a high barrier to entry. So
and sometimes there might be a README there that kind of walks you through it, but what are the chances of that thing working? It's probably got maybe when they wrote the README it was working, but over time it probably didn't. I think when you look at the playlists in Glitch, there's high confidence that this thing's going to work out of the box. You're going to in 30 seconds get that tab on the right that shows you your app running, and you can start to iterate off of that. It's just it's a different class of experience, and I think it's going to move the ball forward.
Well, I'm going to reintroduce you all. So if you've just joined us, welcome. We've got Anil Dash from Glitch and Gabe Monroy from DigitalOcean. We're talking about, we're sort of talking about a new integration between DigitalOcean and Glitch, but it's sort of digging into why is this a good partnership? Sort of what was Glitch built upon DigitalOcean? We've got a comment from Douglas, and they say, great to hear about the love of ideas and learning. I just completed EDU Scrum training, and it would be great to pair Glitch and DigitalOcean tools with student projects. So very cool. Hello, Logan, who's a DigitalOcean designer. So actually, if it's okay with you two, I would love to just show you one of these Wordle apps, how you experiment with it, how you remix it, and like how you get started if you're new to Glitch or new to coding at all. So I don't know, Anil, do you have a favorite one? I'm a big fan of Course, where everything...
Yes, go for it. I hate to pick favorites, but that's a great one.
Okay, so this is like Wordle, but every word is horse. Horsel. Okay, so that was the Wordle playlist. I clicked on that. You can experiment with the actual app before you decide to remix it. So looks like maybe I'm just clicking some letters here. I know this is not right.
I don't like your odds on horse here.
But what I want to do is I actually want to remix this in some way. So I click the remix your own button. I'm logged in with GitHub, and I'm getting now my own fork of the code, which is really cool. I like this MS
doodle.
Paint. Yes,
yeah.
Little doodle.
Exactly.
And then, so I used to be a web app developer, and I haven't been that for a few years. And so when I remixed the Node app, I actually got to relearn some JavaScript stuff and some handlebars stuff. So that was really nice. But yeah, you can just get in here and start experimenting. I always love just changing the color of things because it's a really easy way to change some code and see the change happen, and then you get that dopamine hit. So I don't know, do we have a color we can find here?
I know there was a setting for it. We could change the color of the keys there.
Okay, the keys. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, so color. So I don't know, can you guys give me a hex value?
I think you could actually just use a keyword there, so you could probably go with blue or something like that.
Okay, we'll do blue.
There we go, blue buttons. Look at this.
Oh, there we go.
Look how fast that is. Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah, and one thing I like is the preview. So you do get this developer experience of you have your app that's sort of in your development environment, and if you deploy to DigitalOcean, then you can also change to the production view, which is really outstanding. So yeah, if you are watching and you are maybe don't consider yourself a developer, I think Glitch is a great way to start. So yeah, there we go. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen. So if you have questions for Anil or Gabe, feel free to ask them in the chat. All right. Well, do you two have anything you want to say? I have more questions for you if you'd like, or would you like to chat with one another?
I mean, I have a ton of questions for Gabe, honestly, because I think there's so much to learn from that approach you said about, keeping things simple and keeping things accessible. And I'm curious about, like, what do you think are the next steps? Like, for me as a fan, like, app platform is incredibly exciting. It feels like it has that immediacy and that whole thing that we're talking about, the sort of accessibility in the broad sense. I'm curious for you, of like, if you look forward, what are the things you're looking at that are exciting or that, are coming next?
Yeah, and yeah, I'm glad you're pointing out App Platform. I think App Platform is a really unique product in the DigitalOcean product portfolio, because through App Platform, and if you're interested in the technical details, there's something called the App Spec that is kind of the API that underpins App Platform. It really provides a entry point into the rest of the DigitalOcean cloud experience. So you can use App Platform to connect to databases. You can use it to provision containers. You can use it to provision static sites. You can use it to provision workers and jobs, and all this other stuff that you would need as a developer to build real production grade apps. But we've been able to kind of apply a really great code of simplicity across a lot of underpinning services. Now, you could also go to the underpinning services, and we built great DO-simple experiences there. But I think using App Platform as a leverage point for simplicity is something that I think is really exciting, and really happy to see that come together at the pace that it is. In terms of other areas that are exciting for me, I really think about just taking what's popular in terms of the open source technology base. The CNCF is tracking something like 110 different projects that are, and asking developers to kind of wade through a lot of that is really difficult. And so one of the things we're focused on is, hey, like, what do we think is really going to be applicable to the next generation developers? How can we take some of that technology that's coming out, of those communities, repackage, reformulate that, provide DO-simple experiences on top of that, and to be clear, that's also going to require that we engage in the upstream open source community so that we can help shape the technology. Because these days, a lot of these projects, including kind of like the plumbing projects that are under the hood, there's communities there too, right? So I think with Glitch, we're talking a lot, and DO, we're talking a lot about end user communities. There's also communities at in terms of the building blocks, and so making sure we're focused on community up and down, that's kind of software supply chain, that's used to deliver product experiences, is something that's really important. And through that, I think we're going to enumerate what are the real great opportunities that we have that are matched to where the developers are interested in terms of technology and new ways of building things, and that'll give us a head start in terms of where we can provide simplicity going forward.
That's interesting. I think it is sort of like a cliche that, like, software is made of people, but it really is true. I mean, I think what you're talking about is that, like, we talk about the stack, and it's like every single one of those layers of the stack is a community of people that sort of got together and decided to be generous with one another and share something out in the world. And I think that's like a great North Star about thinking about how to approach that, going forward.
Absolutely. And I guess a question to you as well, like, in terms of like where you want to see Glitch on the community side going forward, I'm curious, like, what's on your mind?
I think there's a couple parts. The first thing I'd sort of say is the ways of participating in the community of Glitch. We want to sort of broaden out, so obviously people want to make apps and they want to share it with their coworkers. We've built a whole team function for people to, want to work with their coworkers or something like that. You can invite people in, and we think of it sort of almost like sharing a Google Doc. You just invite people in, you can edit together. I think that's a really satisfying and gratifying experience. You can even sort of set permissions if you don't want that out in the whole world yet, or your boss says don't put that in front of everybody in the world yet. And so that's like a nice thing. I think that's something we want to make broader and more robust and more collaborative. There's also room for innovation on like things that aren't traditionally thought of as coding. Like one of those things I think of is the playlists example, curating apps. Like I think of some of the other platforms I love, developer platforms like Stripe and Square and things like that. Their folks are putting together playlists of starter apps that use their APIs, and that's something where either they create it themselves or the community creates it. Like Slack is doing a lot of that, and that's really cool to me. It's like a way to participate. Is maybe you make an app, and that's great. But maybe you curate together a place for others to start and create on your platform or on your tools or using a framework that you love or whatever that category is. I see this a lot with like maps. Like people love to make starters that people can use to make their own maps, and you have a little bit of code, kind of enough to be dangerous, but you're fast forward in that way. Those are incredible ways that I think the community can really contribute and collaborate together and do unexpected things. And then, who knows what the future holds. I mean, I still am so excited about, we had done a starter project people can use a couple months ago called Glitch and Bio. And it's sort of similar to the link, the bio link things you see people have on their Instagram or whatever. But we did it on purpose. Obviously there's lots of great apps out there that people use and those are really popular. But we did it on Glitch on purpose because you could see the code and you could edit it. And frankly, I was a little bit offended that people were paying to put links on their own website. Like it just seems like it's against the web. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of like it offended me. It was like, no, you don't have to pay to put a YouTube video on your site. Like that's horrendous. And so we made this thing that like you could put the nice simple thing. Here's a bunch of links, or here's my find me on the other services or whatever. But the sky's the limit. If you want to go nuts changing the CSS and make the styles whatever you want, you can do that. If you want to link some service that nobody's thought of or hasn't used yet, you can do that. And or God forbid, put a domain name on it so it's actually a site that you own instead of controlled by that company. Those were all things that I just was so heartened by, and no surprise, within like 24 hours of it going out, there were all different styles, all different ideas. Somebody recently took the idea and ran with it and made an entire web VR version of the same kind of thing, where you can physically walk through in 3D space, somebody's listed links. That stuff is where, frankly, it doesn't involve us changing a lot in the way the dynamics of the community of Glitch work. We did do some iteration based on what those users told us they wanted. For example, we added support for 3D objects in the Glitch editor for everybody building the VR and XR experiences on the web and AR and all that stuff. And so like we do have that really nice back and forth with the community about what we're enabling. But I think so much of the energy is going to be about, hey, this thing that already maybe you're familiar with, or you think that's too hard for a normal person to build. And probably as fast as you could sign up for one of those services, you can have your own link page for free. And like I said, you're not being squeezed into paying to put a link on a website, which just seems like it makes my skin crawl. It's really itchy. I can't stand it. And so I love that idea of kind of reteaching people, like in past days people would learn when they were making their Tumblr, or I'm old enough, people made their LiveJournal, which was the sort of 20 years ago version of Tumblr. But people made their own websites, on MySpace, on whatever else, and bringing that back for the community, I think, is just as important as the people who are going to build a really productive and effective Slack bot or Stripe integration for payment at work. Like I think those two things feed on each other.
Absolutely. We have some questions in the chat. I'm excited. So this one's for Anil. Why Glitch and not CodePen?
That's a great question. We love CodePen. They were a huge inspiration for Glitch. Those folks are incredible. The community is incredible. I can't say enough good things about them. So I think, first of all, like, yes, do use it. Like, I hope they all find a great way to work with DigitalOcean as well. The truth of it is the majority of the CodePen community is pretty front end focused. And tends to be static sites. They have a lot of capabilities. So again, I'm not diminishing all the great things that they do, but it tends to be about sort of showing off a proof of a design or a front end concept. Glitch is full stack. It's not always obvious to people because it is so instant to get started. People sort of assume that it is just a front end or just like a sandbox for tinkering with CSS or something like that. So I think the thing that Glitch does uniquely well is what's not obvious when, for example, Kim, you remix that app, or, the Horsel app. Underneath the hood, we are standing up an entire node stack for you behind the scenes, and an entire container for you to run that in. And there's a lot of sort of capability there if you want to expand. Now, in the case of a Wordle clone, you probably don't need actually that much more. Sort of the basics are there. But things like build scripts and being able to use different frameworks and bring them in, and being able to decide whether you want your site to be fully static or dynamic. Those are some of the capabilities that differentiate Glitch, I really think, from all of the sort of static, there's lots of fiddles and sandboxes that we've used over the years that I love and we take a lot of inspiration from, but I think can't do that sort of full stack part. And that's part of why we're able to do something like an integration with DigitalOcean that is so robust and is going to be able to do so much more in the future, is that these are two, full stack infrastructures talking to each other, and there's a lot of intelligence we can put into making the experience simple.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, we'll start with Gabe for this next question. Any comments, insights on AI ML's future impact on both DigitalOcean and Glitch? And then can you define AI and ML, Gabe?
Sure. And, I think this is a really important question. And in some ways, this is going to be a defining question, I think, for, technology evolution in the future. But just first to define, AI, I consider really the operationalizing artificial intelligence so that you can query a model and, send it a face and or a picture of a face, and it can, do some facial recognition on that face, right? That's kind of the artificial intelligence component of this. Then there's the ML, the machine learning component of this, which is taking large data sets that maybe have pictures of the faces in them and training that into a model that can then be used for inferencing from an artificial intelligence perspective. And so they're kind of two sides of the same coin. AI, I tend to view as the application integration focus in terms of how you use the capability. ML is how you build the models, right? And data science resources and stuff like that are big in there. Look, I think this is really important because, let's give an example. I was at Microsoft when Microsoft announced the GitHub code, Copilot integration partnership with OpenAI. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, the general idea is you install sort of the Copilot thing into your IDE, you write a comment saying, I want to loop this in this way or whatever, and boom, the code gets written for you. And it is shockingly accurate, like in terms of how effective the code that comes from this artificial intelligence actually is. And so I think when developers look at this, they're blown away at what, like how much of a step function improvement this AI capability is, especially when you get that end-to-end product integration. The challenge is that most developers are nowhere near being able to build that kind of thing. Right. And so really these AI ML capabilities are like integrated end-to-end AI ML are the domain of the tech elite or the domain of companies who have massive data science resources. And so I think this is another area where you think about 40 million people rolling up to the market by 2030. This is one of the things that we have to make super easy for them, because the companies and the individual developers who are able to take AI ML and capability and AI enable their applications, they're going to stand out in the way that a GitHub Copilot stands out today in terms of its ability to innovate. And so I think both in terms of developers on their learning journey, as well as frankly accelerating time to value for folks who could just want to get started with sentiment analysis or speech to text or text to speech, right? There's a lot of off the shelf AI models that people could use that you could imagine being integrated into a Glitch ecosystem or into DigitalOcean ecosystem, where it would allow us to sort of bring people on that journey. Ultimately, that journey is going to likely end in, hey, I need to customize this model. The example I like to give is, let's say you're doing speech to text, right? And you're translating some stuff, but like you're in Boston where they've got that accent, right? And so like your model is off the shelf. It didn't really account for the Boston accent, but if you can retrain that model on the basis of the historical data that you've had, with the Boston accent, in that data, you can actually increase the accuracy of your speech to text service by sort of integrating that ML capability. So there's this whole spectrum and this whole journey I think we need to take developers in this ecosystem on. It's something I'm really excited about because I'm always looking for areas where we can really level up, the game, and kind of those step function improvements. And I think this is one where I'm just super excited to drill in and love to hear Anil's thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all dead on, and I think one of the things I sort of emphasize. So the one of the most popular ML frameworks is TensorFlow from Google, and we saw that team actually, unbeknownst to us, we found out when we sort of saw the work around it. They started to use Glitch to build examples in JavaScript because traditionally it had been pretty hard to set up TensorFlow in your local dev environment. It wasn't the kind of thing you were going to do casually on the weekend, and it was a perfect example. I'm very curious about it. But am I going to neglect my child for a weekend while I sort of learn how to get this running on my Mac? No, I'm not going to do that. And instead, they made it as accessible as any, sort of JavaScript library they can reference. And then they built reference examples on Glitch, and that was so powerful because it took, and Gabe, you and I have talked about this, time to hello world, from zero to idea. It took time from hello world to seconds instead of literally days, because I did fight with trying to get that dev environment set up. And it's, that's again, not a criticism. Of course, it's hard to set up the most advanced AI and machine learning models that you can do are going to be hard to do on your own. But if you can just reference what's there as a starting point, it's a great way to fast forward and accelerate, especially when you have reference examples in the case of the Google team that were these really, honestly, heartfelt things. They were helping you auto-generate music if you could just sort of play one key on a keyboard, and these really great things that would help you draw if you weren't great at drawing. They were really soulful. They were thoughtful. And I was like, gosh, this is the best of what this tech can help us do. And I thought really importantly, sort of two things came out of that. I think the first is there's a really strong and rightful worry about the impact of AI on culture and on society, right? These things can be trained because they're trained on society. Are they going to reproduce the problems that we have in the world? And I think one of the things that's really powerful about having a community like Glitch is people can look at each other's work and learn about what is working, what isn't working, or if they see a harm or a flaw or a bug, whether it's a big bug or just a little tiny one, they look at each other's work and say, maybe this is something I can remix and improve. And I think that's something that's really key is we have to be very cautious about how these tools are deployed because every day is the best of intentions, and I think people are really curious and rightfully so. But also they can have, harms baked into them or just accidentally included. And so by having a community, especially a diverse community, inclusive community, you increase the odds that somebody's thinking about, hey, did you anticipate this problem that might be there or something like that? I think that's really key. The other thing I'd sort of share is a story that has stuck with me for a couple of years now since the TensorFlow team started. People at Google were working on building those examples and they wanted people to learn how to do it. And here in New York City, we have a nonprofit organization called Mouse that builds a lot of the curriculum for especially high school students to learn to code. And for many years, they've used Glitch to teach people. I think one of the earlier comments had talked about, enabling students and this kind of thing. And so high schoolers were using those TensorFlow examples to learn about the cutting edge of ML, and AI. And that was such it's such an inspiring thing. But what was striking to me was for the kids learning, they're like, this is great. I'm doing a thing I wouldn't have been able to do. It's real code. It's not some toy sandbox. It's like a real thing I can put on my resume or put on my college applications. But then the folks who are at Google, and if you're working on AI at Google, you are amongst the best coders in the world, right? This is the most exalted thing you can be in this industry. And they were saying that was one of the things that meant the most to them about getting to do this work, was seeing high schoolers, young people who a lot of times they're in public school in New York City. They're not, these are not kids that always have, every door open for them. And for even the most experienced and respected and revered coders in the tech industry to look at kids in a public school and say, oh, this is actually why it turns out I was making this. I didn't know it until I saw it. I think that is the power of making things more accessible, making things more open, building communities where everybody's welcome.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we're coming up toward the end. We've got maybe one or two more questions, and we'll go back to my demo. So this question from Daniel Flanagan. They ask, curious how long ago the idea for a Glitch and DigitalOcean integration started, and then how long it actually took for both teams to integrate.
I like the pragmatism of that question.
I do too.
I will say, I think we have been talking as companies for probably years at this point, just because Probably not obvious actually for somebody to ask a question like that. You know, like we're both like a lot of the teams are in New York City. I was always very inspired by DigitalOcean had one of its first demos at the New York Tech Meetup, which is like our sort of launching pad for a lot of startups here. So they were always inspiration. So we were always in touch, and I got to know a lot of the folks because I know even before Gabe you had started. You know, we started talking, and then memory is fuzzy during COVID, but I feel like it was a couple of months ago we really started getting serious about maybe there's something here that we should start to focus on. And then really the last 2 months was very intense work by both teams to get the core parts working. I mean, Gabe, does that match your recollection?
Yeah, and as you said, I wasn't here for this, so other folks on the team would have a better answer. But my sense on this is that the idea of a 1+1=3 partnership has been floating around for a while now, and then at a certain point, it's like two companies will just get gutted up like, hey, look, it's time. Like we understand what we need to go do. Let's go do it. And my sense was that that time period in terms of once we were actually meaningfully engaged on the project hasn't been that long. I don't know what to quote exactly. Some other folks on the team would probably have a better answer on that. But I think, to me, it just points out like when there's motivation on both sides, everyone understands like what the North Star is, what everyone's role to play is. An integration like this actually doesn't take that long to go do. But some of the discussion in advance, sometimes that can take a while just in terms of, because we all got lots of things we could prioritize, lots of different areas we could go. Is this one the top of the list? And I think pretty quickly we realized it wasn't. So.
Yeah, you got to get the suits like me out of the way and let the builders build, and then things happen pretty quickly. But actually,
guilty as charged.
One of the things I will say is it does speak to the power of openness, because the underpinnings of this first version, like I said, we're going to keep iterating and improving. But this first version, the underpinnings of it really are centered on the fact that every Glitch project is a Git repo under the hood that's automatically committing your code as you go. We have an interface we call Rewind that lets you sort of slide back the timeline and see back your old versions of your code. But what's happening under the hood is regular standard Git, nothing proprietary, nothing closed. And again, to DigitalOcean's credit, it's always been one of those sort of great forms of openness that you all have had, of that like Git is a fundamental way to bring your code in, and there isn't anything proprietary locking your code in. And so that makes it easier to move fast on everything else, because everybody's agreed around not having lock-in and not using something proprietary, and sort of just using the tools that are standard for devs across the industry. Even though we made the experience nice and smooth, and we try to make that all simple and integrated, I think it's really very important for people to understand this is what we talk. This is why we started by talking about that openness and that philosophy of how your dev experience should connect together, because then it does let all of us who get the privilege to build these tools be able to give developers what they need and connect together and improve it over time and keep iterating. But I think that's something that definitely check under the hood of all the tools you're using and make sure that they've got that potential for the future. I think it should be a make or break for any of the tools that developers use.
Indeed.
Great. Thank you. All right, so we're wrapping up. Anil privately slacked me a message and said, "Oh, let's go back to that Horsel app." So I'm going to share my screen.
See, collaborating on code.
Exactly. And so this is the HTML page, and I just found all the instances of the word horse and changed it to ocean. And then if I go to the JavaScript on line 41, this is where the word gets set. That's accurate. So right now the word is horse. So let me hide that. O-R-S-E, enter. All right. So
5 greens, look at you.
But let's change it to ocean. So now instead of horsel, it's, I don't know. Someone make a portmanteau of that. This is so O-S-E-A-N. So it's fun to remix apps on.
Bravo.
Well, thank you so much, Anil and Gabe. We're going to call out some places where people can go to find the collaboration. Oh, we have some audience comments. Matt Rushing says it's been a super fun collaboration. We're excited to share it with the world. Matt Rushing's on the DigitalOcean side. Mr. Tubber 44 says thoughtful, insightful conversation. Appreciate ya. So yeah, if you are interested in deploying a Glitch app to DigitalOcean, go to glitch.com/DigitalOcean. We did have someone ask earlier, John, saying, is there a way to do this for free? We have $100 worth of DigitalOcean credits for anyone signing up for DigitalOcean for the first time, so check that out. And then if you start experimenting with this and you need help scaling your apps, the DigitalOcean sales team is here for you. So check out this link. Yeah, and John, I hope you give it a spin. It's really fun. All right, so last comment, the $100 credit can be accessed at this link, glitch.com /DigitalOcean. So thanks so much, Anil and Gabe. It was great to chat with you and to hear you talk with one another. And maybe we'll be able to have a follow-up to this conversation soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everybody.